A large gathering of radio amateurs occurred on July the 13th and 14th, 2019 at the annual Gippstech conference. The conference is a 2-day event held at the Federation University Australia at Churchill in Victoria's Latrobe Valley, and it has a range of speakers on various technical related topics. This year, proceedings kicked off on Friday evening with an informal meal at the Morwell Hotel Motel. This gave many the chance to catch up over dinner and discuss the program ahead. Saturday morning rolled around and it was time for the conference to begin, although some VK4s were not yet acclimatised to Victoria's cold weather. Glenn, VK1XX, was busy showing everybody his latest reference board that locks the IC 9700 radio to a GPS reference. You can check out the link to his presentation in the cards above. The first presentation was carried out by David, VK5KK, Ian, VK5ZD, and Tim, VK5ZT. They discussed their epic VK microwave DXpedition of 2019, which covered several states of Australia travelling around, making microwave contacts on bands up to 122 GHz.
So this is same arrangement but backfeed, so 24, 47 and 76 gigs. Ian had the stressful job of working microwave. So here we are back in, that's the car. I did actually wash it once. Ian washed his very well the day after. So his was cleaner at the end of it. So what was the total distance? Anybody want to have a guess? Keep going. Higher. Higher. 5,800 kilometres in 12 days.
Next up, the VK3 UM and VK3 XPD awards were then handed out.
And it's always hard for the committee to make the decision that the VK3 UM award for last year's best presentation, so that's based on both the presentation that was given and the documentation that's provided for the proceedings document, goes to Jim, VK102.
This year's award winner was chosen on the basis of his significant achievement in our hobby, more specifically the millimetre waves on 122 gigs. So I'll announce the winner, and the winner is Sydney. Oh, wrong award. Now the winner is Stefan Durcic from VK4CSD from Queensland for his work on 122 gigs.
Thank you very much.
The next presentation was by David, VK3HZ, who described his accurate azimuth indicator.
And I got well, a typical GPS receiver that you've got in your car or in your phone or something is really only good for 5 metres accuracy. That's what they say online. In the short term, maybe 2 metres if you're averaging. You might get better than that if you average for longer. So here's the prototype, little plastic box here with the, it's a very blurry picture, I'm sorry about that. But you've got this is the LCD shield and the Arduino's underneath that. And here's the GPS board that's acting as the rover. And over here we've got the GPS board that's acting as the base with a little battery pack there. And here we've got the UHF antennas and the GPS antennas, and all this is supplied in that evaluation kit, so everything you need. And here's the setup on Rex's setup. I think this is a 10 gig system, I think, yeah. So we've got the antenna on top and Rex's optical sight here. He's actually drilled a hole through his dish to put the sight through so that it's right in line with the axis of the tripod, so everything on the axis. And here's the remote system on a little tripod that can be put out 5 metres out in a convenient direction to allow the alignment.
Next presentation was a closer look at non-ionising RF radiation safety by Mark, VK5AVQ.
I had about 50 of these signs printed up for work, and it came back non-iodising radiation. Back to the printer. So, again, practical assessment. The basic restrictions, well, we can't measure them directly, so hopefully not anyway. And so we use field strengths and the standard levels of volts per metre. You probably all heard about that. Amps per metre is the current equivalent or flux density. The three are all related by Ohm's law using the free space impedance of 377 ohms. So where does your near field and far field end and start and finish? So this is a traditionally defined table, and if you notice right at the bottom, I'm saying as you get close in, the free impedance is not 377 ohms, and the E and H link is complicated.
The last talk of the morning was done by Peter, VK4EA, who discussed the history and the current status of the VK4 RBB beacons.
This afternoon, late VK4 RBB was at a private residence in Murray, which is a riverside suburb in eastern Brisbane, and we only had a few bands. There's actually 5 antennas there. I don't know what the 5th one's about, and neither does Doug. I asked him. But yeah, it was a fairly rudimentary, but it was pretty innovative for the time. It wasn't GPS locked, just with the tone and CW ident. So what's new? Well, we added a few bands, notably 5.7 and 24 gigs, which is good for me because I can never work out whether my 24 gigs was working. It's all GPS locked, and that was based again on Alan Devlin's initiative to GPS lock all the beacons in Australia. And we implemented JT modes, and we leaned quite a bit on the ZLPLL. So thanks to Wayne. Yep. Wayne was an enormous help to us in this with his controller. And there was some funky mixing, which was all this about. I think it's pretty innovative the way that Doug got this achieved. So there's a picture of the construction. Doug is really good at putting things together. It's not XPD style, for sure. So there's no purple wires and yellow wires and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, we need your help. That's basically the other thing. Is the cost of running these things is not insignificant. The clubs help out with the electricity. So it's around about $300 per box per year, and then of course we've got the licences as well, which not all that much, but it still adds up for a small club. So visit our website and chuck some money at our PayPal account. That'd be awesome. And we thank those who have donated already. I know there's a few in the room who have done that.
We then had a break for lunch, which gave us the opportunity to catch up with each other and discuss the morning's topics. I managed to also catch up with Scott, VK4CZ, and Peter, VK4EA, to ask them what they thought of Gippstech this year and what they'd like to see in the future. First question, what did you think of the program?
I think program this year probably, to be honest, not quite as good as previous. Hopefully we'll get some better.
Is there anything else coming up that you're interested in? Any interesting subjects that have caught your eye?
I think actually George 4AMG, his 10 meg reference locking piece is going to be actually interesting, just the learnings he's had out of it. Glenn.
Oh, the 9700, yep.
9700. Glenn just blows my mind every year.
Yeah, he's an extraordinarily intelligent bloke.
Yeah,
looking forward to seeing that product.
Human computer, and but is actually able to communicate incredibly complex topics really simply. So
as a 9700 owner, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, exactly the same.
What would your advice be for those that want to come to future Gippstech meets? Gippstech 2020?
Gippstech 2020, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to see a lot of the people you communicate with on a regular basis, catch up. The topics are actually, for me, probably secondary a lot of the time. It's actually the social side of it. The topics just add the cream to the actual weekend.
I'm the other way, the technical things for me are the important thing. And Kevin, VK4UH, has often said if you come to this weekend and you're not inspired after the weekend, you haven't been listening.
Yep, absolutely. You don't walk away without learning something.
Absolutely.
And you've done a talk, Peter. You did your talk on VK4 RBB and
the RTT beacon, yes.
Yep, and that was received very well.
Seemed to be, yeah.
And I think a lot of people learned from that, so that was really good.
Well, I hope to inspire other clubs or other organisations to put some microwave beacons up, because they are very useful to the microwave community.
And you mentioned in your talk too, you said about the beacons, part of the Brisbane VHF group. What are people who want to contribute towards that? What can they do?
Go to the website, just Google Brisbane VHF group, and there's a PayPal button there, or send us an email. We're happy to take your money.
Speaking of a similar type of conference as Gippstech, talking about maybe in summer, maybe a similar type of arrangement in Queensland. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, we're thinking about a waterfront type scenario where it's warm and the typical southeast Queensland weather patterns. highly technical type conference gathering, similar to what we're having here. We'd like to make it easy for people maybe to travel from North Queensland or from Western Queensland to come in.
And a question related to the future of Gippstech. Do you think that it should be brought to, say, a wider audience through perhaps live streaming or videos, or what would you say to that?
Absolutely support that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the future of amateur radio, bringing younger people in. The other side is there's a lot of old people who can't travel as well, so it's going to provide benefits to both those communities. The other side is that hopefully that the video assets saved, so people can refer to it on an ongoing basis as well.
It's an amazing information resource that shouldn't be hidden away.
After an enjoyable lunch, we sat down for the afternoon, and Dale, VK1 DSH, brought us through an automatic satellite ground station for satellite telemetry reception.
Getting back to the antenna, need to point it. We need to know where it's pointing. Need to know where to move it to. And the way I've done that is at the top here, in this box, I bought one of those little Honeywell magnetometer boards that you can connect to an Arduino. So that's just oriented on the antenna axis. And so the antenna elevation is fixed at 45 degrees. It's only a 3-element Yagi, so it covers, it's got quite a wide beam width. So what you get, one satellite at least, JO97, transmits as part of its telemetry pictures, slow scan digital TV. They don't update very often, but they do occasionally, so you get pictures of camels or salt lakes or jeeps in deserts. Digital voice as well, they send down some digital voice packets which come down as files. So there's one there from the message of the Prince of Jordan saying greetings in English. It's all good fun. And the data, as it comes down, is sent back to their data warehouse for them to do whatever they like. If you want to get involved in satellites in a simple way, at least to start, receiving telemetry from the amateur satellites is good fun. It's easy to do. There's plenty of opportunity for messing about. And of course, there's many more satellites up there that have much more sophisticated systems, 9600 bits per second and more, and transmit all sorts of data. And people are always happy to get the telemetry from the amateur community. So if you want to try something interesting, try some of those. But as I said before, while it's good fun to listen, you do need to get on the air.
I did a talk
Next up, Justin, VK7TW, presented his 10 GHz microwave adventure, and that being the Whitebox transverter, GPS locked using a ZLPLL, a low noise preamp and a 3-watt power amplifier.
Box that looked like this, which was a very nice conversion actually. The mini kits box is in here. This is the cavity filter. This was the original local oscillator. There was an amplifier added to it, a preamp added to it. That's the TR relay. And then there's a whole lot of control and the actual transverter that's actually in this box here. And it was all put into the repurposed 2RU rack mount unit and ended up looking very nice. And in fact, it is, I kept with that box. So, the Trans-Tasman Improvement, the original PLL board taken out, there was a bit of modification done. I actually tapped into that multiplier with a lot of help, and I have to say a lot of help from Ralph, who pointed me in the right direction, which was fantastic. And then a bit of modification to the case. The ZLPLL doesn't put out quite enough to drive the two balance mixers once you multiply it up. So there is a mini-kits preamp in there which gave a bit more gain. Few conclusions. I'm into recycling, reusing and reducing the amount of crap that goes into landfill. Breathing new life into hardware. It's now GPS locked and I have a bit more power and it doesn't, it's not quite so deaf. And I have used it for weak signal modes. I've used it certainly to receive the beacon out of Germany on 10 gigs, which is a great test for any system. Minimal cost, there wasn't that much that I put on it, and lots of experience in in experimenting and getting things working on the way through.
The next presentation had a lot of people talking at the afternoon break, that being the leap second and status of UTC by Peter VK2 EMR. What started as a relatively serious consideration of the subject ended up turning into quite a humorous discussion.
Although we did have a video as well, but I thought this would save time. But this is the leap second. I'm sure we're all familiar in some way of the leap second, but if everything's working correctly, when it's inserted, it'll show us 23, 59, 60 before going to 2400 all zeros. In the UK at National Physical Laboratory, but the clock wasn't running the whole time. 7 fundamental constants of the SI system, but the SI second, they made a small adjustment in some of the text here. But that is the current definition of the SI second. And of course there's an uncertainty with this. Now the problem is, or maybe it's a good thing, but the ITU is the only UN specialist agency involved in this diagram. And although they had representatives from some of these other organisations on the relevant study group, really the responsibility of the ITU is only to disseminate the information that they receive from these other people. But relax, it gets worse. So as you can see, it's quite straightforward. Method B was to retain UTC as currently defined and introduce a continuous atomic timescale based on AIO, but with an offset to be broadcast on an equal basis. And other people have said, well, look, this is very confusing. And method C was no change, but there's 2 variations of no change. One is... someone said where one stands depends on where one sits on this issue, and someone else said a decision should be made as early as possible or as late as necessary. This is the sextant I used to use when I was at sea, and I suggest that the next meeting on this should occur at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, whose acronym is UTC. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter. And we're way over time.
Sorry about that.
The highlight of Saturday afternoon was Rex VK7MO bringing us through extending the 10 GHz EME World Record. Rex's presentation also included his dish, which he was able to cut up and transport to New Zealand for this record attempt.
And to cut it up into petals, what I did is, before I cut it up, I made these little brackets so that everything all bolted it together in the right place. And then I cut it up with a metal blade in a jigsaw. And I must admit, most of my colleagues in Tasmania thought I was nutty. Then, to get it to New Zealand, I had to pack it all in a suitcase, and so all these little petals were wrapped together and stacked into a suitcase with the elevation and azimuth systems. I was a bit worried about the actual transmitter unit, so I wanted to carry that cabin baggage so I could look after it. Imagine getting on a plane. The interesting thing is, I got through all the way to New Zealand. I've actually left this system in New Zealand at the moment because I want to go back. But on the way back, I had left a little SMA spanner about that bloody long, and they took that off me. So we actually got decodes for only 5 minutes less than the window down to -1 degree. So it was pretty encouraging. Most of that's with 0, so no prior knowledge required for those decodes. And You can see we're even exchanging congratulatory messages like thanks, so happy, and fine business on 1900 QSO.
Roger VK2 ZRH then took us through the appropriately titled presentation, Are We There Yet? Roger's presentation covered Solar Cycle 24, whether we're at the bottom of the cycle, and when we can expect things to start to improve in Solar Cycle 25.
A presentation about the solar minima, which everybody was wrangling about at the time. So, just what are sunspots? There's a view. So the cooler regions on the visible surface. And when those magnetic lines pop above the surface, it cools what's happening. So, does size matter with the minima? Yep, it sure does. So here we are, spotless days over pretty much the last decade. So that's the number of spotless days, not necessarily consecutive, that's the totals. So in this period here, it got quite low. So that's the 2008 one, I should say. And of course there's a peak in here. So that's 2017, 2018 is this one. So it was spotless for 221 days total over 2018. That's kind of average. Are we there yet? Are we at minima? Well, actually, you never know because it's done statistically. You don't know until about 5 or 6 months later. So we can't answer the question until later. But there are predictions and projections. We're in here, but they reckon there are projections in here, so they're a bit out. The actual fact is not matching.
Any questions for Roger?
The basic answer is no. Right. We're not there yet.
Well, maybe, but we won't know until Christmas.
That's right.
Roger's presentation concluded the conference proceedings for Saturday. Saturday evening was again a chance to catch up and socialise over a dinner at the Morwell Club. There was a real buzz in the room as everybody discussed the day's presentations and enjoyed the meal ahead. After being spoilt with so many interesting presentations, Sunday quickly rolled around and it was no exception. George VK4 AMG took us through a GPS discipline frequency reference, traps for young and not so young players.
In the last day, that it has a very important part in digital communications. I really want you to listen carefully. I'm going to ask questions. What's the radio? That's not. 706. That's a start. Oh no, I didn't say I wasn't clever. These errors are additive, so all these added up will end up at 1 part per million at 1296. And so this is the little RefGem board I've come up with, and it's basically the same as we saw, but it doesn't have a crystal on it. It has a 10 meg reference. Then only needs to be set up once, can be supervised to check that the 10 megs is available and that nothing's gone astray in the clock gen. And this gives quite a good result. And this is the sort of thing that's more suitable for portable operation for a single band, where the 10 meg reference is more suitable for a whole of shack type solution.
Following George was another radio-related stability and reference solution by Glenn VK1XX for the IC 9700. The full presentation can be viewed in the cards above.
I don't think it's universally. I don't think I think the appraisal Rex was somewhere between. It's like technical slave driver. But he knows how to bring out the best, and get the best out of people, even though he doesn't know what you're really doing. So, but it sparked like an interest in time and frequency stuff, because I've never really bothered before. With trying to get stuff down to 0.01, 0.001, 0.0001, hertz, and it's okay for SSB-CW and WSJT at 1296 because of the tone spacing. Marginal for whisper at 1296. Your mileage may vary because the ability to correct depends on the drift rate internally in the radio, how much what ratio you're transmitting and receiving. It depends on whether you're opening the car door or not. It depends whether the thing can track. But if you're in a stable environment in a shack, it's pretty damn good. But again, it's marginal at whisper at 1296. It costs you between maybe 0.5 and 3 dB. There are some things I have seen it get lost. I have seen this internal firmware go the wrong way on correction when it was subject to a thermal shock, like opening my shed door in Canberra when it was 20 degrees inside and it was 0 outside. Open the door, cold air floods in, and the thing, instead of going, from starting 10 hertz off at 1296, actually went the wrong way, and it went the wrong way up to about 40 hertz, and then before it started coming back. I've seen it happen a couple of times.
Second last presentation of the day was by Wayne, VK5APN. Wayne gave a very interesting and informative presentation on grid squares and his experiments with a little main head 10-digit location finder.
Unless you're very new on the scene. But we'll just give an outline here. So if you don't have any decimal spots, you're probably doing something space related. 1 decimal point, you're probably talking about a city. 2, a neighbourhood. The next one's a cul-de-sac, a house, or the corner of a house. Someone in the house, someone pointing at Waldo. And then keep going in, sand the grain, and then probably down to atoms. And I discovered this guy, ON7EQ, it's his webpage, and he made up this nice little project. That's all right, but there's no date. And the locator was only 6 digits. So I dived into his code for my first attempt at Arduino and learned a fair bit. Fitted it all in with at least 1 character spacing between data. I managed to do it this way. So from the latitude and longitude, I obtain the 10-digit grid square locator. So it's also got time and date, but I'm not so sure if that time is correct. Plus or minus 1 or 2 leap seconds. The other thing too is, because there are various versions of, do you do day, month, year, or month, day, year, or year, month, whatever. And if I wanted to have at least 1 character spacing, I couldn't have 6 digits, day, M, Y, with slashes in there. It wouldn't have fitted. So I then opted to change the month into a 3-letter character, so it eliminates all confusion.
Justin, VK7TW, then finished off the presentations by showing his Azimuth and Elevation GPS rotator for 10 GHz EME, which includes the Arduino-based controller, which can be used to determine your location, and the CCTV Azimuth Elevation base mount to track the sun and the moon.
When I started to dig into it, I have to say the last dot point there is this is a fantastic project for anyone who's looking for a rotator software, both azimuth and elevation, and it is also GPS locked. So, and I'll go into how that is an advantage to this. The application, anything requiring azimuth and elevation. So if you're in the satellite, Dale's talk on tracking satellites, this would be absolutely perfect. We're using it for Earth, Moon, Earth. It uses a common Arduino platform and uses the integrated development environment, etc. So the azimuth and elevation manual controls, they're the black buttons. And then there's a moon, sun, stop and park button, which it's configurable. You make them what you want. And there's 2 other buttons that are about to go in here, which is calibrate on the moon and calibrate on the sun. And I'll go into that in a minute. This is what I use on it. This was actually the first time I received the 10 gig beacon in the backyard with an offset feed dish using this particular arrangement, and this is what I'm actually moving to, which is a 1.13 MyTech dish. You can see with the counterweight etc. on there. And I'll acknowledge Richard's wonderful aluminium welding skill for that particular mount there.